The avoidant person is experiencing something that creates profound discomfort and undeniable recognition that the dynamic has fundamentally shifted. They're feeling that you've outgrown them completely, that you've evolved beyond the version of yourself they knew, that you've transcended the patterns and the pain that characterized your connection with them, and that you now exist on a different level of emotional maturity, self-awareness, and personal power that places you beyond their reach. This isn't just about physical distance or lack of contact, but about a fundamental incompatibility between who you've become and who they remain. This outgrowing is not something you announced or claimed. It's something they're sensing through your energy, through your choices, through the way you carry yourself, through your lack of responsiveness to the patterns that used to work on you, through your apparent peace and forward movement that contrasts sharply with their own stagnation. The avoidant person can feel that you're no longer operating from the same emotional place you were when you were with them, that you're no longer the person who would tolerate their patterns or accept their breadcrumbs or organize your life around their inconsistent availability. They can sense that you've done internal work that has fundamentally changed your relationship to yourself and to what you will accept from others, that you've healed wounds that made you vulnerable to their dysfunction, that you've developed clarity and boundaries that make you impervious to the manipulation and the push-pull dynamics that used to keep you engaged. The feeling they're experiencing is not just that you've moved on or that you're doing well without them. It's the more unsettling recognition that you've actually grown beyond them, that you're operating at a level of consciousness and self-worth that they haven't reached, that you've become someone who wouldn't choose them even if they were available because you've outgrown the need for what they offer, and you've recognized that what they offer is insufficient for who you are now. This recognition is threatening to them in ways that your anger or your hurt or your pursuit never were, because those reactions confirmed you still cared, still were affected by them, still were engaged with them emotionally. But your outgrowing them communicates something far more final and far more devastating, that you've left them behind. Not through rejecting them, but through surpassing them, through becoming someone for whom they're simply no longer relevant or appropriate as a potential partner. The energy shift they cannot ignore or deny. The avoidant person is sensing your outgrowing of them primarily through the shift in your energy that they can feel even without direct contact, even from a distance, even through the minimal information they might have access to about your life. This energy shift is not something you're performing or projecting deliberately. It's the natural result of your internal transformation, your healing, your growth, and it's radiating from you in ways that create an unmistakable signal that you've changed fundamentally. Understanding this energy shift and how the avoidant person is experiencing it reveals both the reality of your growth and the discomfort it's creating for them. The first aspect of the energy shift is that you're no longer emitting the frequency of need or longing that characterized your energy when you were with them or immediately after the relationship ended. When you were together, when you were invested in making the relationship work, when you were hoping they would change or choose you or show up differently, your energy contained need. Need for their validation, need for their consistency, need for the relationship to work, need for them to see your worth and to treat you accordingly. This need was palpable to them, even if never explicitly expressed, and it gave them a certain power and a certain comfort because it confirmed their importance to you. But your energy now contains no such need. You're complete without them. You're not seeking their validation. You're not hoping for their return. You're not organizing your emotional state around their choices or their perception of you. This absence of need in your energy is something the avoidant person can feel, and it's profoundly unsettling because it means they've lost the power that your need gave them. The second aspect of the energy shift is that you're radiating confidence and self-worth that wasn't as apparent or as solid when you were with them. Your energy used to contain elements of insecurity, of seeking external validation, of questioning your own worth. particularly in moments when their patterns activated your wounds. But the work you've done, the healing you've experienced, has fundamentally shifted your relationship to yourself. You know your worth now in ways you didn't before. You're confident in who you are and what you deserve. You're no longer seeking evidence of your value from external sources, but are grounded in an internal knowing of your own worth. This shift in your energy from seeking to knowing, from uncertain to confident, is palpable even from a distance. And the avoidant person can sense it. They can feel that you're no longer the person whose self-worth could be destabilized by their withdrawal or their criticism. And this recognition makes them aware that the dynamics that worked before wouldn't work now. The third aspect of the energy shift is that you're emitting peace and groundedness rather than the anxiety and reactivity that characterized your energy during the relationship's difficult periods. When the avoidant person was triggering you through their inconsistency, when you were caught in the anxiety of the push-pull dynamic, your energy was reactive, anxious, seeking stability that the relationship couldn't provide. But your energy now is calm, grounded, stable in ways that don't depend on anyone else's behavior or choices. You found your center. You've developed the capacity to regulate yourself without needing them or anyone else to provide that regulation. This peace in your energy is something the avoidant person can sense, and it communicates that you've resolved something internally that you were struggling with before, that you've moved to a different emotional place that doesn't include the chaos and the anxiety they associate with you. The fourth aspect of the energy shift is that you're radiating forward movement and purpose rather than the stuckness or the waiting energy that might have characterized the period immediately after separation. Your energy is directed toward your own life, your own goals, your own growth and development. You're building something, creating something, moving toward a future that excites you and that has nothing to do with them. This forward-moving energy is completely different from the energy of someone who is stuck in the past, waiting for someone to return, organizing their life around absence or loss. The avoidant person can feel this directional quality in your energy, this sense that you're moving away from them and towards something else. And this movement away is more final and more threatening than any explicit rejection would be. The fifth aspect of the energy shift is that you're no longer available for the games, the drama, the push-pull dynamics that used to characterize your interactions. Your energy has a boundary and a clarity that wasn't as defined before. You're not open to manipulation. You're not responsive to breadcrumbing. You're not interested in ambiguous connection or in being someone's maybe someday option. This boundaried quality in your energy creates an energetic wall that the avoidant person can feel. It's a recognition that access to you is not available to them, that you're protected in ways that prevent them from slipping back into your life through their usual strategies. This energetic boundary is something they can sense even without testing it, and it communicates a finality and seriousness that makes them recognize you've genuinely moved beyond them. The sixth aspect of the energy shift is that you're emitting indifference or neutrality toward them rather than the emotional charge, whether positive or negative, that would indicate ongoing engagement. When someone is still emotionally invested in a past relationship, their energy toward that person contains a charge. Anger, hurt, longing, hope, something that indicates the person still matters and still affects them. But your energy toward the avoidant person now is neutral, possibly even genuinely indifferent. You don't hate them. You don't long for them. You don't think about them much at all. They've become part of your past, a learning experience, a chapter that's closed without ongoing emotional activation. This energetic neutrality is perhaps the most threatening aspect of the shift because it means you're not engaged with them, even in a negative way, that they've become truly irrelevant to your emotional life, rather than being important even through hurt or anger. The avoidant person is feeling this energy shift through whatever minimal contact or information they have access to. Through how you look in photos they might see, through the tone of any communication, if communication exists, through reports from mutual friends, through your social media presence if they can access it, through the energy they sense when they think about you, or when they're in proximity to your life in any way. They cannot ignore or deny the shift because energy is real and palpable, because the difference between who you were and who you are now is so significant that it creates an undeniable impression. Because your transformation is evident in ways that transcend words or actions and that communicate on a fundamental level that you've changed in ways that place you beyond their reach. This recognition that they're feeling, your growth, your evolution, your outgrowing of them through your very energy, is creating a discomfort they cannot rationalize away, and an awareness that they've lost not just access to you, but any hope of recovering what was lost because you've become someone different, someone who has moved beyond who they remain. Your outgrowing of the avoidant person is particularly impactful because it's not just about you changing, but about the gap this change has created between who you've become and who they've remained. This gap is making starkly visible the difference in your trajectories, in your emotional development, in your capacity for growth and self-reflection. And the avoidant person can feel this gap as a judgment of their own stagnation and as evidence that you were always capable of a growth they cannot match. Understanding this gap and how it's manifesting reveals why you're outgrowing them is so psychologically threatening. The gap is evident in your emotional maturity, which has increased significantly while theirs has remained static. You've done work to understand your patterns, to heal your wounds, to develop a capacity for emotional regulation and for healthy relationship. You can identify your triggers, can communicate your needs clearly, can take responsibility for your part in relationship dynamics, can maintain boundaries while remaining open to connection with appropriate people. This emotional maturity is a result of conscious work, of therapy or self-reflection or healing practices that have developed your capacity beyond where it was when you were with them. But the avoidant person has done no such work. They're operating with the same emotional capacity they had when you were together, the same defensive patterns, the same inability to tolerate intimacy or to process difficult emotions. The gap between your developed emotional maturity and their unchanged emotional limitation is vast and obvious, and it makes clear that you've grown in ways they haven't and possibly can't without substantial work they show no signs of undertaking. The gap is evident in your self-awareness, which has deepened considerably, while theirs remains shallow or defensive. You can look at yourself honestly, can acknowledge your shadows and your limitations, can see your patterns without defensive distortion. You understand why you made the choices you made in the relationship, what wounds were activated, what you were seeking, what you've learned. This self-awareness allows you to take responsibility and to make different choices going forward. But the avoidant person lacks this self-awareness. They still blame external circumstances or incompatibilities for relationship failures. They still cannot see their patterns clearly or take full responsibility for their role in what happened. They still operate from a defended position that prevents honest self-examination. The gap in self-awareness means you're operating from a place of knowing yourself while they're operating from a place of defending against knowing themselves. And this creates a fundamental incompatibility in terms of consciousness and growth. The gap is evident in your relationship to vulnerability, which is transformed from something threatening to something you can access and express appropriately while they remain terrified of vulnerability and defended against it. You've learned that vulnerability is strength rather than weakness, that showing your authentic self, including your needs and your struggles, creates intimacy rather than destroying it, that being seen fully is a risk worth taking with appropriate people. This shift in your relationship to vulnerability has made you capable of deeper connection and has healed the shame that made you hide parts of yourself. But the avoidant person still operates from the belief that vulnerability is dangerous, that showing need is weakness, that being fully known would lead to rejection. The gap in your relationship to vulnerability means you're available for genuine intimacy while they remain defended against it, making it clear that you've outgrown their level of emotional availability. The gap is evident in your standards and boundaries, which have become clear and firm, while theirs remain either non-existent or rigidly defensive. You know what you need and deserve from relationships. You know what behaviors you will and won't tolerate. You can communicate your boundaries clearly and can walk away from situations that don't meet your standards. Your boundaries are healthy limits that protect your well-being while allowing connection with people who respect them. But the avoidant person either has no real boundaries beyond their defensive walls, or their boundaries are so rigid that they prevent any genuine intimacy. They cannot distinguish between healthy boundary setting and defensive distancing. The gap in your capacity for appropriate boundaries versus their defensive limitations makes evident that you've developed discernment and self-protection they lack. The gap is evident in your capacity for genuine connection and interdependence, which you've developed, while they remain trapped in compulsive independence. You've learned that you can be independent and connected, autonomous and intimate, that these aren't mutually exclusive, but are both necessary for a healthy relationship. You can lean on others when appropriate, while maintaining your own sense of self. You can give and receive support. You can be vulnerable and strong simultaneously. But the avoidant person is still trapped in all or nothing thinking, where connection equals loss of self, where depending on anyone feels like dangerous weakness, where intimacy and autonomy cannot coexist. The gap in your capacity for healthy interdependence versus their compulsive, defended independence makes clear that you've integrated a complexity they cannot handle. The gap is evident in your forward movement and growth orientation versus their stagnation and resistance to change. You're actively working on yourself, developing new capacities, pursuing growth and evolution as an ongoing practice. You see yourself as always becoming, always developing, always capable of learning and changing. But the avoidant person is static, operating from the same defensive patterns they've always used, resistant to change because change requires vulnerability and discomfort they cannot tolerate. They're not growing or developing, but are repeating the same patterns that have always characterized their relationships and their life. The gap between your growth orientation and their stagnation makes painfully clear that you're on different trajectories, that you're moving forward while they're standing still, that you've outgrown them, not just in a moment, but in terms of your entire approach to life and development. The gap is evident in your peace and contentment versus their ongoing struggle and dissatisfaction. You've found a measure of peace with yourself and your life. You're content with who you are, even while working to grow. You're satisfied with your choices and your direction. But the avoidant person remains in struggle, dissatisfied with their relationships, uncomfortable in their defended isolation, unable to find peace because their defensive strategies create the very isolation and disconnection that makes them unhappy. The gap between your peace and their struggle makes visible that your path has led somewhere good, while their path has led to continued suffering, that your growth has created well-being, while their stagnation has created ongoing pain. The avoidant person's feeling that you've outgrown them is not abstract or imagined. They're sensing this outgrowing through specific concrete ways that your transformation is manifesting in your life and in your responses to any contact or information about each other. Understanding these specific manifestations reveals how completely you've moved beyond them and why this is creating such an impact on their awareness. The first way they're sensing you're outgrowing is through your lack of response to their attempts at contact or to their presence in your awareness. If they've reached out through a message, through mutual friends, through subtle attempts to get your attention, your response has been either non-existent or politely disinterested, lacking any of the emotional charge or eagerness they might have expected or experienced from you before. You're not jumping at an opportunity to engage with them. You're not reading significance into their reach out. You're not organizing your emotional state around whether they contact you or not. This lack of response communicates clearly that they're no longer important to you in ways they once were, that you've genuinely moved past the point where their attention matters or affects you. The avoidant person can feel this disinterest, and it's a completely different energy from what they're used to from you, making clear you've changed in fundamental ways. The second way they're sensing you're outgrowing is through visible evidence of your thriving and your forward movement in your life. They might see through social media, through mutual friends, through any channel of information available to them, that you're doing well, you're pursuing goals, you're engaged with your life, you're possibly in a new relationship, you're clearly not stuck in the past or diminished by the ending. You look happy, you look confident, you look like someone who is building a meaningful life rather than someone who is suffering from a loss. This visible thriving is evidence that contradicts any narrative they might have maintained about you being too attached or too dependent. And it makes clear that you were capable of moving forward and creating a good life without them. The contrast between your visible thriving and their own stagnation or struggle makes the gap between you painfully apparent. The third way they're sensing you're outgrowing is through reports or impressions from mutual friends or from your social network that indicate you've changed significantly. People who know both of you might comment that you seem different, more confident, more at peace, more focused on your own path. These reports from outside observers confirm what the avoidant person is sensing directly, providing external validation that your transformation is real and visible to others. Friends might even comment that you seem like you're in a different place than the avoidant person, that you've moved on in ways they haven't, that you seem to have done work that they should consider doing. These comments from others make undeniable what the avoidant person is sensing, that you've outgrown them in ways that are apparent not just between you, but to your broader social circle. The fourth way they're sensing you're outgrowing is through the quality of your energy and presence. If they encounter you in person or see you from a distance, if circumstances put you in proximity at an event, in a shared social space, in a mutual friends context, the energy you bring is completely different from what it was before. You're calm, centered, grounded. You're not reactive to their presence. You're not avoiding them in ways that would indicate you're still affected. You're simply neutral, treating them like anyone else with a polite distance that communicates they hold no special significance. The avoidant person can feel this energetic neutrality, this lack of charge around them, and it communicates more clearly than words ever could that you've moved beyond them emotionally and psychologically. The fifth way they're sensing you're outgrowing is through your apparent lack of need for closure or for final conversations with them. Someone who hasn't moved on, who hasn't outgrown a relationship, typically wants closure, wants a final conversation to understand what happened or to express their feelings or to get answers. But you've demonstrated no such need. You don't seem to require anything from them. Not an explanation, not an apology, not an acknowledgement, not a closure conversation. You found your own closure internally through your healing work. And you don't need their participation to feel resolved about what happened. This independence from needing anything from them communicates that you've processed the relationship and the ending without them, that you've moved to a place where they're no longer necessary, even for the purpose of resolution. The avoidant person can sense this lack of need for closure as evidence that you've truly moved beyond them. The sixth way they're sensing you're outgrowing is through your improved relationship choices. If you're dating or in a new relationship, if they're aware that you're seeing someone new, they can sense or observe that the person you're with now is different from them, possibly more emotionally available, more consistent, more capable of healthy partnership. Your choice of a healthier partner communicates that you've raised your standards, that you now recognize and choose people with greater capacity, that you've outgrown the tolerance for avoidant patterns that characterized your willingness to be with them. The avoidant person might sense this through reports or observations, and it makes clear that you've evolved in your understanding of what you deserve and in your ability to choose accordingly. The seventh way they're sensing your outgrowing is through your apparent forgiveness, or at least absence of bitterness about what happened between you. Someone who hasn't outgrown a relationship often carries anger or bitterness that's palpable in their energy and their words. But you've clearly done work to process and release these emotions. You're not bitter about what happened. You might even express, if the topic comes up, that you're grateful for the learning or that you found peace with how things unfolded. This lack of bitterness, this apparent forgiveness, or at least neutral acceptance, communicates that you've moved through the healing process to the other side, that you've integrated the experience and moved beyond it rather than remaining stuck in hurt or anger. The avoidant person can sense this emotional freedom, and it makes clear you've done work they haven't done, that you've achieved a peace they haven't found. The avoidant person is experiencing your outgrowing of them as more threatening, more destabilizing, and more psychologically uncomfortable than your anger, your hurt, or your pursuit ever were during the relationship or immediately after its ending. Understanding why this outgrowing is uniquely threatening reveals both the psychology of the avoidant person and the power of your transformation.